On May the 26th, 1883, in Köln-Mühlheim, a suburb of Cologne, Germany, Peter Kürten was born. He was one of 13 children, 2 of whom died very young, and they lived in extreme poverty. The entire family was crammed into a one-room apartment. His father was a violent alcoholic and took out much of his anger on Peter. In addition to beating his wife, who was also an alcoholic, he was very violent with the children too. Peter's father would also rape his wife in front of the children, and in 1897 would spend 18 months in jail for incest after raping his 13-year-old daughter. Peter's mother was eventually able to obtain a legal separation from her violent husband. She remarried and moved to Dusseldorf. Growing up in this abusive household had profound effects on the young boy. He was a bright child and did well in school, but often refused to go home and would run away repeatedly. During his absences from home, he would steal and commit petty offences. He would continue to steal and commit other crimes for the rest of his life. Peter later claimed that aged 9 he had drowned 2 classmates. They were playing on a raft in the river when he pushed one of the boys off, knowing the boy could not swim. When the second boy jumped in to try and save him, Peter held his head underwater until he drowned. The story could not be verified, and many believe he made it up. Also around age 9, Peter became friends with a dog catcher that lived in the same building. The man often tortured the animals he caught and introduced Peter to a shared joy of killing, and some say to bestiality as well. At age 13, he said he started seeing a girl who was happy enough with foreplay, but resisted actually having sex with him. Frustrated, he claimed he turned to bestiality to satisfy himself. He discovered that he got the most satisfaction if he stabbed the animal during the act. After he was almost caught by a farmer, Peter decided to cease the acts of bestiality. As Peter grew older, his forays into sexual perversions were sometimes a bit too close to home. He attempted to rape the same sister that his father had. His other criminal activity had accelerated to theft for more than survival. He also added fraud and arson to his list of accomplishments. He set many fires in his lifetime and claimed they gave him a sexual thrill as well as a feeling of power. He also claimed that in 1899 he had picked up an 18-year-old girl, and while walking her home in the countryside, he strangled her and left her body there. No record of a crime fitting this description could be found. It is possible that the girl was in fact not dead and simply didn't report it to police out of a sense of shame. Peter was apprenticed to the same place his father worked as a sand moulder, but he was not satisfied there and one day stole all the money he could get from home and work and ran away for the final time aged 16. He was caught by police not long after running away and sent to prison. This was his first long prison sentence, which lasted from 1900 to 1904. He later claimed that the prison system was so horrible that it was the main factor in his crimes, saying that he wanted revenge for how he'd been treated. He also said that his time in prison, especially the time spent in solitary confinement, helped to foster his fantasies of violence during sexual acts. After being released from prison, he set a string of fires and committed numerous other crimes. He was drafted into the army, but military life didn't suit Peter and he deserted. When he was caught, he was sent to jail from 1905 to 1913. Again, he would later claim that he was so badly mistreated and would blame his crimes on all his experiences in prison. After he was released in June of 1913, he picked up a girl named Margarete Schäfer and took her out several times. He would always give the girls he took out a fake name and tell them he had a well-paying job and was single, even after his marriage. Peter always presented himself well. He dressed in nice clothes and was very concerned with his appearance. On one occasion, he choked Margarete several times. When she became frightened, he told her, "That's what love is like. I won't kill you though." The night ended with them having sex on a bench. Margarete's description of the events was somewhat different. She said he tried to have sex with her, but she was able to fend him off. She couldn't go home because Peter had her bag with her keys in it, so they stayed on the bench until morning, when he again attempted to have sex with her. He choked her, pulled out some of her hair, bit her, and ripped off her earrings. She was able to calm him down though, and he warned her never to tell anyone. It was also in the summer of 1913 that he committed his first verified murder. On May the 25th, he travelled back to Köln-Mühlheim looking for an easy place to burglarize. He settled on an inn run by the Klein family. The family lived above the inn, and while Peter was looking through the bedrooms, he came across the 10-year-old daughter of the owner, Christine Klein, sleeping peacefully in bed. He grabbed her by the neck, choking her, and she struggled to free herself. After a couple of minutes, she fell still. On his way out of the room, he managed to drop an embroidered handkerchief with his initials on it. The next day, he visited an inn across the street from the crime scene to listen to the locals talk and express their outrage at the crime. Suspicion quickly fell on the girl's uncle, Otto Klein, who witnesses claim had a fight with her father shortly before the murder. The police didn't think it unreasonable that the brother had planted the handkerchief to throw suspicion on the father, whose initials were also PK. Otto was put on trial but acquitted for lack of evidence. Peter followed the news of the investigation and trial with interest, relishing the attention the crime was getting. Peter later claimed he committed 3 chopper attacks, only one of which could be verified. He broke into a house, but just as he was going to kill a 16-year-old girl, a man surprised him and jumped out at him, and he quickly fled. In July, he broke into another house and crept into a bedroom with 3 beds in it. He chose the bed with a 17-year-old girl named Gertrude Franken in it, and strangled her to death, achieving sexual satisfaction upon seeing blood coming from her mouth. Only a few days after this murder, he was caught by police and sent to prison for arson and burglary. He remained in prison from 1913 to 1921. Again, his treatment in prison fueled his rage against society, or so he would later claim. Once released from prison, he went to live with one of his sisters in Altenburg. There he met and married a former prostitute named Augusta Scharf, who had spent time in prison for the murder of her former fiancé. Despite Peter's normally solitary nature, he seems to have formed a genuine attachment to his wife, though some sources claim that she only agreed to marry him after he threatened to kill her if she didn't. For several years after their marriage, Peter led a seemingly normal life. He had regular employment as a moulder and even became active in the trade union. Then, in 1925, they moved to Dusseldorf. His fidelity didn't last long after the move. His love of arson also returned. He had an affair with a servant named Tida and one named Mek. He said that he often grabbed Tida by the throat, but when she got mad he would pacify her, and it wasn't until she realized that he was married that she went to the police and Peter was arrested for attempted seduction. Mek and Tida found out about each other, and Mek told the police that Peter had raped her. He was acquitted on the rape charge but ended up serving a few months for threats and insulting behavior towards Mek. In the summer of 1925, Peter claimed to have attempted to strangle 3 women, Maria Kiefer, Maria Wack and Annie, all of whom survived. In 1928, he seems to have satisfied himself with arson, setting a confessed 11 fires. Next on the growing list of victims was Frau Kuhn on February 3, 1929. He left his house in the evening with a pair of sharp scissors, looking for someone to kill. He spotted a woman in a relatively secluded street and approached her. He said, "Stop! No noise!" grabbed her by the coat and started wildly stabbing her. He stabbed her 24 times before running off. Miraculously, Frau Kuhn survived the attack and the tip of the scissor blade was found when she had an X-ray lodged in one of her bones. On the 8th of February, Peter was walking near his house when he came across a 9-year-old girl named Rosa Ohliger. He took the little girl to a secluded area, telling her he was taking her home. When he had finished committing his outrages, he moved her body under a hedge and left, leaving a single shoe sitting out in the open. Once he was home, he filled a bottle of petroleum and went back to the crime scene to set the body alight. But as there were people nearby, he decided to wait. The next morning he returned and set the body on fire. She was found shortly after by some workmen passing by. By now Dusseldorf was gripped by fear and the hunt for the Dusseldorf monster or monsters was on. Peter would change his choice of weapons multiple times, making it hard for the police to identify just how many murderers they were dealing with. On the 12th of February, just days after attacking Rosa Ohliger, Peter again left his house in the evening armed with scissors. After hunting around for a victim for a while, he ran across Rudolf Scheer, who appeared to be drunk. After noting that Rudolf seemed unarmed, Peter stabbed him multiple times until he died. The next day he returned to the scene of the crime and came upon a detective heading in the same direction. He started talking to the detective about the crime, and as they came up to the crime scene, the detective asked him how he had learned of the murder so quickly. Peter smoothly told the detective that he had heard by telephone. The detective was suspicious, but didn't question him further. Delaying and confusing police efforts to catch the killer was the false confessions of a man named Stalsberg. He had attacked 2 women with a noose, attempting to strangle them. Both had a noose thrown around their necks and pulled tight. Stalsberg was identified as the culprit. He was a mentally handicapped 20-year-old living with his family in a nearby lodging house. His account of those 2 crimes matched down to minute details, and he is still regarded as having committed those 2 attacks. The police were eager to catch the criminal who had committed the other recent attacks, and Stalsberg falsely confessed to the attacks on Frau Kuhn, Rudolf Scheer, and the murder of Rosa Ohliger. When asked to describe these crimes, there were discrepancies, unlike when he had described the first 2 attacks. But the police decided to believe his confession regardless. Because of his mental state, he was sent to an asylum, and the police thought the case was closed, until the attacks continued happening. On August the 8th, Peter met a girl named Maria Hahn and made a date with her for the Sunday afternoon. That evening they were strolling by a river and decided to have intercourse. Peter then brought her to a meadow and strangled her. At some point he also drank blood from the wounds on her neck. He would later tell doctors that he drank so much of her blood that it made him sick. Peter later returned intending to nail Maria's body to a tree to create outrage, but found the body to be too heavy for him and so reburied her. He would later tell the police that while burying the body he found sexual satisfaction in the simple act of seeing the congealing blood again and caressing the cold, lifeless body. He also told police that he would sometimes visit the graves of his victims and would also achieve satisfaction by handling the soil from the grave and reliving the crime in his mind. On the evening of August the 24th, Peter left his house with his dagger and headed to the local festival at Flers. There he chanced upon 2 children, foster sisters Louisa Lenzen, 14, and Gertrude Hammacher, 5. By his own account, Peter followed the children until they were in a relatively unfrequented field path, then approached Louisa, the older child, and asked her to go and fetch him cigarettes from a kiosk, and he would watch the younger child. He then gave her money to do so, and as soon as Louisa was out of sight, he grabbed Gertrude by the throat and carried her over to a smaller field path, strangling her along the way. He then pulled out his knife and committed further atrocities. Quickly cleaning the blood-stained blade on grass, he then returned to the spot from where Louisa had departed to meet her. When she returned, she dutifully gave him the cigarettes, and he, in turn, grabbed her throat and strangled her. He kept strangling her as he lifted her up and carried her to near where Gertrude was laying. Just as he had with Maria Hahn, he tried drinking some of her blood. Peter then left the scene and went home for a quiet evening with his wife. He returned to the scene the next day to enjoy the reaction of the locals. That same evening he picked up a woman named Gertrude Schulte and went with her to a fair nearby. On their way back he convinced her to go through some meadows and they sat down near the Rhine. When she denied him sex, he grabbed his dagger and attempted to cut her throat. She screamed and attracted the attention of people in a nearby tent. He stabbed her multiple times in the back and ran off. Though gravely injured, Gertrude survived. By this time the police suspected that the killer had tried to drink the blood of some of his victims. And when the press discovered this, they ran with the story, calling him the Vampire of Dusseldorf. On the 29th of September, Peter met Ida Reuter at a railway station. She was visiting Dusseldorf on her day off. They had a beer and went for a walk in a wooded area. As it got dark, Ida wanted to go back, and as they turned to head back the direction they had come, Peter pulled a hammer out of his pocket and struck her on the right temple. She collapsed, and on hearing people in the area, Peter dragged her into a meadow. Ida then woke up and Peter hit her in the head with the hammer again and then raped her. He left to dispose of her purse, then returned intending to throw her in the river, but saw a man walking his dog and quickly left. It was not until the 11th of October that Peter would strike again. He left his house with his hammer in the evening looking for a victim. Near a theatre he met Elisabeth Duria and they went for a walk along the Dussel River. While they were walking, he pulled the hammer from his pocket and struck her on the right temple. Again he dragged his victim off the path. He proceeded to rape her and hit her with the hammer again. He threw her cloak and hat into the bushes and left her there, still alive and groaning. She was found still clinging to life on the morning of the 12th, but never regained consciousness and died the next day. On the 14th of October, the police received a letter from an anonymous source describing the burial spot of a body and included a map. The police did not take it seriously and nothing was done to follow up on the letter. It had in fact been sent by Peter and accurately described the location of Maria Hahn's remains. On the 7th of November, Peter set out once again with his trusty scissors into the city. He came across a 5-year-old girl named Gertrude Albermann. He lured the child into a secluded spot, grabbed her by the throat, strangled and stabbed her. He then carried her body a few more feet and placed her face down among some stinging nettles next to a wall of a building. The remains were discovered on the 9th of August, and only hours later a newspaper received an anonymous letter detailing the location of the body. Also included in this letter was a reference to the letter sent to police earlier revealing the whereabouts of Maria Hahn. It wasn't until the 15th of November that police found Maria's body. Things remained quiet until February of 1930 when he attempted to strangle 5 women. On one of those occasions he had actually brought the victim back to his apartment and was interrupted by his wife before the attack could take place. On May the 14th, Peter witnessed a man approach a girl in the railway station, and she accompanied him from there. Curious, he followed them to a wooded area where the girl refused to go any further. Sensing an opportunity, Peter approached them and convinced the girl whose name was Maria Budlik, that the other man was leading her in the wrong direction. So she followed Peter, and at first she agreed to go to his apartment with him. But when they got there, she refused to go in and asked to be taken somewhere else. He led her to a wooded area where he raped her. Since she had not offered much resistance, he took her back to the tram, thinking she wouldn't remember where his apartment was. In a letter to a friend, she described what had happened to her, but by chance the letter was misdirected and ended up going to the wrong person. That person took the letter to the police. But before the police found her, she had already managed to find Peter's apartment herself. So when the police contacted her, she was able to tell them exactly where he was. On the 21st of May, Peter spotted Maria at his building and cleared out quickly, arranging to meet his wife later. Knowing he would be arrested, he confessed to his wife after they met at a restaurant. He then convinced her to turn him into the police so that she could claim the rewards that were being offered for identifying the culprit of his various crimes. Later, when pressed as to the motivation in confessing, Curtin stated, "Why don't you understand that I am fond of my wife? And that I am still fond of her. I have done many wrongs, have been unfaithful over and over again. My wife has never done any wrong. Even when she heard of the many prison sentences I have served, she said, 'I won't let you down, otherwise you'll be lost altogether.' I wanted to fix for my wife a carefree old age." They arranged to meet at a church where she was to bring the police. On the 24th of May, he met her at the prearranged site, and as the police closed in with guns drawn, he offered no resistance and reportedly said, "There is no need to be afraid." Shortly after being arrested, Peter quickly confessed to many of the crimes. In the end, he was charged with 9 counts of murder and 7 counts of attempted murder. His trial began on the 13th of April 1931. He pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity to all charges and tried to recant his earlier confessions. Despite testimony from numerous psychologists and even Peter himself, the trial only lasted 10 days. He was found guilty on all counts and sentenced to death. At the time, Germany still used the guillotine for executions, and on July 2, 1931, he was escorted out to the execution platform. On the way, he reportedly asked, "Tell me, after my head is chopped off, will I still be able to hear, at least for a moment, the sound of my own blood gushing from the stump of my neck? That would be the pleasure to end all pleasures." When asked if he had any final words, he said briskly, "Nein." After the execution, his head was taken for scientific investigation. No abnormalities could be found, and his head ended up in the possession of Ripley's Believe It or Not Museum in Wisconsin, USA, where it remains today. Well, my dear friends, I hope you are still with me after that terrifying journey into the dark days of the Weimar Republic. Holy dooly, another monster on the list. Whoa, wow, he was a scary dude. Wow, I mean, makes you wonder, him and Albert Fish, why didn't they catch a stray bullet somewhere along the line? Would have saved a lot of lives and a lot of misery for the families involved. All the good people that have been killed at a young age, through war and through stray bullets. Makes you wonder why these people get to live so long. Anyway, Sarah researched this story. Well done, Sarah. It was a long one. It would have been longer. Sarah had actually included the attempted murders, and he did quite a few of those too. I didn't include the attempted murders. I think it would have lost some of its momentum if I had included them, because there was quite a lot. My opinion formed is he seemed to be quite a cowardly person, attacking young women or children, and even when he did attack a man, the guy was also of a small build and was, totally drunk, and he attacked him from behind. So there's no bravery in this. He seems to be someone who is, maybe he had like a Napoleon syndrome. He was a small guy, probably got beat up in prison, and his way of lashing out on the world, he couldn't take on big guys, so he took on people and children who were a lot weaker than him, and that's how obviously he got his power, or he felt powerful by doing that. Monsters like Peter Kürten and Albert Fish fascinate us because we, as normal human beings with a normal conscience and a normal mindset, we cannot imagine. We try to wonder how these people can reach such depths of depravity, and it's interesting that he offered his head to be dissected for science to see whether they could find any abnormalities. And it's very interesting to see they didn't find any abnormalities. We always try to look for a reason why these people would do such horrific acts, and sometimes it's just evil. There's just a pure nastiness about these people. Evil. There isn't any reason, there isn't any organic reason why they would do that. And that's when we come to realize that evil does exist. Of course, there are psychologists who will blame it on their childhood, on their upbringing. But there's many other people who have had just as horrendous upbringings and have been in prison and suffered all sorts of abuses and haven't went on to become monsters. In fact, have went in the opposite direction, have went on to help people and be good. So, I think it's the upbringing can certainly be a factor, but it comes down to the person themselves. My goodness, that picture of his dissected head, isn't that horrific? It's one of those things that I couldn't help sort of look at and stare at, and the more you stare at it, the more horrifying it is. My goodness, and that's in the Ripley's museum there. Wow. Has anyone from my Patreon community actually seen it? Been to the museum? That's the first time I've actually saw those images. I knew about Peter Kürten, but I hadn't actually realized that he had offered his head to scientists. Wow, what a creepy exhibit. Well, I think I'll wrap this up now and get it to the final edit. Want to thank you as always for your kind comments, and I've had a lot of comments from people saying, and Tamara reminded me this the other day, that people said, I will follow you anywhere, Oddie, and I think that's such a lovely thing. That really gives me so much encouragement, and I keep thinking if YouTube did fold one day, or they no longer were a platform that I could upload my videos, and even if Patreon collapsed, I'm sure I would find a way. I would open up my own website if it came to that, because I have such a loyal following, and I hope it continues. I really do. I can't imagine not doing this. I really and I really do hope that I can continue for, well, as long as I can. Let's put it that way. Anyway, my viewers, I'm off now. Take care. As always, God bless. Be safe, and see you next time.